Now, it's time for It's Your Money. With interest rates the lowest we've seen in decades, millions of savers have resigned themselves to pretty miserable returns from their bank or building society account.
For many who don't want to switch to another investment, it means struggling on a lower income than expected. But there are ways of moving your cash safely, where it may give you that little bit extra.
How many of us have followed that annoying but wise advice to shop around for a better deal?
Come on now, let's get down to business. I don't got no time to play around. What is this? Must be a circus in town.
Unfortunately, even if you've done all your research, you're cursed by low savings rates wherever you go. And if you're older, it'll be difficult to boost your income a lot if you're reliant on a bank or building society account. And even if you're convinced there are no rewards for saving right now, moving your cash elsewhere may help your investments to earn just a little bit extra.
With me in the studio is Paul Banfield from Best Advice Financial Planning. We'd like some of that, please. Well, I want to know, first of all, what are the types of rates that you can expect in a regular savings account at the moment?
Well, the difference is unbelievable. The lowest rate is only 1/10 of 1%, right up to over 4% for an internet account. So it's very important that people do shop about.
Why do they change? I mean, why do you get the best rates on internet accounts?
Well, there's less costs for the providers involved.
Because you do all the hard work yourself, really, don't you?
You do, actually. So they can then pass on that rate to us. But I do believe with some of the old-style accounts that the building societies and banks are really not advising people to move over to these better type accounts.
Is it worth moving your savings account for 0.5%, something like that? Is it worth all the bother, all the hassle?
Well, don't forget, 0.5% on 10,000 is £50 a year, so why throw that away? Certainly with people with bigger sums, they should be looking around. And of course, the main disadvantage with leaving your money in a current account is the interest rate is really so low. So, you know, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
OK, how easy is it? If you are going to switch, if you've seen a better rate somewhere else, how easy is it to switch banks, building societies?
It's amazing when you go in to tell them that you're going to switch your account, how many good accounts they come up with all of a sudden.
That they didn't tell you about before.
They didn't tell you before. It is easy to move. People should do it much more than they do.
What about the maximising your tax benefits, ISAs as well? We're not just talking about savings accounts here. People can forget about them. I mean, are their rates quite good at the moment?
The trouble with ISAs is they've now obtained the volume of money they were looking for. So the ISA rates are now not as competitive as they were. It's still worth opening an ISA, of course, because of the tax advantages. You won't pay any tax on any cash ISAs, any money invested. But of course, there is a limit of £3,000 per year currently.
What's the sort of rate you can get on a cash ISA at the moment if you shop around?
About the best is just under a very good internet account, so something like 3.8%, which is disappointing really. I think the providers, the banks, building societies should be putting up that rate to make it more appealing. OK,
shop around. It's always the key piece of financial advice, isn't it?
Absolutely. Never keep all your eggs in one basket.
OK, thanks very much indeed, Paul. Thanks for coming in.
Sounds like good advice.
This is the 7 o'clock news on BBC Three.
Pint of beer, a new TV or a pension? Guess which one we're not choosing.
Despite repeated warnings of a pensions crisis, we're still not saving enough. 2 in 3 under 30s aren't putting any money away for their old age. The figures for the self-employed are even worse, and yet most people are refusing to cut back on their spending. BBC Three's Nicholas Wallace has more.
Instead of saving up for what we need, nowadays we get what we want on credit. It means that money that could go towards our pension fund ends up being spent on repaying our debts.
British consumers lavish £54 billion a year on holidays, cars, hi-fis and going out. Pensions are well down the list of priorities. I asked an expert to look at 1 or 2 well-known people's finances and tell us how much they should be putting away each month. First of all, there's the barmaid, Kat Slater.
Kat, the problem she has is she's on a very low income, but she still needs to take care of the future. Maybe going out 1 less evening per week, and it'll put right what's currently a bad situation.
You having a laugh?
Then there's the much-lamented Ricky, a mechanic.
Ricky, he does earn more money than Kat, but then again he has his childcare costs. He's going to be changing jobs regularly, He needs to look at his pension provision now because no one will do it for him.
So, what exactly are you saying?
Finally, a problem case. This is Ian. He works in catering.
Ian, he's been really reckless. I'm cross with him. He's had the money and he's let it slip through his hands. Being self-employed, it's important he puts money away when he can to make sure that he smooths out the peaks and troughs.
Unfortunately, pensions aren't a joke, but asking people to put their money out of reach for 20 or 30 years doesn't seem to work anymore.
We know we should be saving for the future, but a lot of us just aren't. And even if we wanted to, the record levels of debt we're carrying mean that putting money towards a pension is becoming harder than ever. Nicholas Wallace, BBC News.
Now, apparently, if you save your money rather than spend it all, you're going to be less stressed and enjoy better health. Well, at least that's what the latest research is telling us. So you'd think that this would be an incentive for the 60% of us who don't save to save.
But it seems the reasons for not doing so are less to do with whether we can afford to and more to do with our age and lifestyle. Here's Marcia Hughes with this week's It's Your Money.
Since landing a leading role in the West End musical Mamma Mia, Tim Wallace can now give savings some serious thought.
It's such a precarious job, acting. You know, you earn a little bit of money here, a bit of money there, you get sort of gluts of it. But this is different. This is a year's contract, therefore it's a weekly wage, it's stability. I've just got married, so it's fantastic from that point of view. So basically, now that I've got this semi-permanent income, I want to know what to do with it because I've got some savings, but I need to know exactly where to put it.
Well, what state are your finances in? Have you got any savings at all, Tim?
Well, I have got some. I've got £4,000 in a cash ISA, and I've got a Halifax Building Society account, which I basically keep for tax purposes because I'm not tax assured, because I'm self-employed. So that's basically it. So it's all pretty cash orientated. There isn't really sort of investments or savings per se.
And have you ever invested in the stock market before?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't really understand it. I don't understand all the columns and stuff in the papers. I try and read it, but I don't really get it.
What about your future, your retirement? Have you a pension?
I have got a pension. I started a pension 10 years ago and I put the minimum into it, and I don't really know how much that's going to accrue over the years. I don't know what the end total will be, and I know that I could put more into it. There is a maximum, but I don't know what that is that you can put in each year.
Well, let's get some advice. With me now is Paul Banfield of Best Advice Financial Planning. First of all, Paul, what should be the split in terms of investment or saving planning?
Well, the golden rule always is firstly you put enough aside for emergencies in an instant access deposit account to make sure that you cater for any unforeseen circumstances. And then you split it up really depending on how you feel you would like to take a risk. If you like risk, then split it into stocks and shares. If you're not so much a risky person, then in much more safer investments.
Of course, the big problem nationwide is we're not saving enough. We're a nation in debt. Does that have a logical outcome?
Well, we do spend too much money on credit cards, that's absolutely right. So people like Tim now, in his new job, really need to think about saving and doing that regularly in order to cater for the times maybe when things are a little more difficult.
Now, tell us about ISAs, the rules, the levels, and what you can expect on a return.
Yeah, there's two types of ISAs. There's a maxi ISA where you can invest up to £7,000 in the stock market per annum. Or alternatively, there's a mini ISA where one of the components is you can invest in cash up to £3,000. This really is the most popular form of ISA at the moment, a £3,000 investment into a building society account.
Now, is there a safe way of investing on the stock market?
Well, there wasn't until...
If there is, I don't know.
there wasn't until recently. Obviously, lots of people had their fingers burnt with the stock market recent downturn, and now it's a good time to be looking at stock market investments. People are still very cautious. So there are funds available and companies that offer protection for your money while investing on the stock market.
Very quickly, Paul, how often should you review your savings?
Without a shadow of a doubt, at least yearly. But like Tim, with any major change in your occupation or moving home, you should do it then as well.
All right, Paul Banfield, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, Sadie Frost and Jude Law were granted a quickie divorce this week, just one of the 157,000 marriages that end every single year.
Breaking up brings with it huge emotional trauma, but can also be very costly in financial terms. In this week's It's Your Money, Sarah Pennells has been finding out how to ease the financial pain of a big split.
Now, sir, tell me your troubles.
Well,
in Hollywood, marriage breakdown is all about slick divorce lawyers and gold-digging ex-wives.
You should respect that.
This is going to be my passport to wealth, independence and freedom.
And in the film Intolerable Cruelty, George Clooney gets slightly more than he bargained for when he falls for his client's ex.
I would be delighted, honored, if you'd... You named him after your ex.
I'm sentimental.
But away from the movies, the reality is very different. Joan Faithfull split up from her husband just over a year ago, and last month finally moved into her own flat. But although she has a full-time job, she was worried that she wouldn't be able to afford a place of her own.
I was lucky enough to have a larger deposit than perhaps other people could get, but there were certain lenders that I couldn't go to, but yeah, we managed to secure a mortgage for me in the end.
How daunting was it to make the financial decisions entirely on your own?
I had to, it takes a lot of sorting out. You have to sit down and go through all the, obviously the money issues of things and make sure that you can afford it. And a lot of thought really. It's not something that you can do over, say, a week or so. It does take a lot of planning, and you have to look at all the areas to make sure that you can actually afford to move on and to move on to be happy.
Splitting the money that paid for one household into two obviously creates its own problems. And for divorcees like Joan, that means keeping a close eye on where every penny goes each month.
The way the money's divided on divorce will have a knock-on effect on your financial health for years to come. Although it may be tempting to sort out all the other issues first, experts say that working out how you'll cope financially after you split should be a priority.
Often finance is looked at after the divorce has actually gone through, and of course this should be looked at far earlier. People are very stressed at this time and often put it to the back burner. It's important that they really open their eyes and realise the consequences of not picking up all the knowledge that they need as quickly as possible.
The lunchtime news now on BBC One with Anna Ford and Asad Ahmed.
Well, we piled on debt at a record rate last month, with people increasing their borrowing by a record £10.5 billion. That's an increase of 14% on last year. And most of it was down to home loans, which increased by almost £9 billion. Here's our economics correspondent, Jenny Scott.
Mark Alladin is up to his neck in debt. He's got a £180,000 mortgage plus various loans connected to his business selling baby products. And he's very worried.
Well, with the four debts that I have, I've got my mortgage, the car loan, business debt, credit cards, all these things with the interest rates and things like that going up perhaps, it's going to cause me quite a few problems.
It seems we just can't resist piling on the debt. Last month, between us, we borrowed an extra £10 billion. Most of that was in the form of mortgages to fund our obsession with buying property, which is fine while interest rates are so low, but what happens when they go up? Something that could happen as soon as next month.
We're seeing people now accepting as the norm large credit card debt and entering into very large mortgages. It only takes small increases in interest rates to put people into difficulties with both paying the mortgage and credit card debt. Longer term, the problem is that can affect the economy. People are now not saving like they should, and this really is a big problem waiting to happen.
So what's the answer? Keep rates where they are and we'll probably keep taking on new mortgages. Raise them too much and you risk spooking us and the housing market into a sharp retreat. Jenny Scott, BBC News.
Now, obviously buying presents is part of Christmas, but nobody wants to waste money on something that will end up being buried away in the back of a cupboard.
So if you're stuck over finding that perfect gift, have you ever thought about spending on something that could make a real difference to you, your family and others? In this week's It's Your Money, Marcia Hughes has been looking at charitable giving.
We spend over £7 billion a year on charity. That's anything from street collections to monthly donations. And at Christmas time, we give twice as much than in any other month. But there's still a third of us who don't give to charity at all and could do with some persuading.
Dear Angel, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I hope you get lots of presents. Love, William. Kiss, 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 kiss.
For the past few years, William, Guy and Laura Horseman have been writing to the boy their family sponsor. It may have been their parents' decision, but it's the children who've benefited most from being involved.
We all get lots at Christmas, some of which we don't really need, and it's nice to give something to people in other countries that makes a lasting difference. And we can choose gifts from their catalogue, like sheep and goats, to send to them.
It costs the family £20 a month to sponsor Angel through World Vision, money which goes towards supporting him and his community in Honduras.
It's a two-way process in which you're giving some money to the community, but you're also learning something about the community. You're watching the child grow and see him change and develop and benefiting from that. Whereas I think if you're simply putting money into a big charity pot, sometimes it's a bit anonymous. So it's, for us, a much more rewarding way of giving.
Professional street fundraisers have become a valuable lifeline to charities, and although not everyone likes to sign up to a charity this way, it's increased the number of people who donate tax efficiently via direct debit or standing order. It's also helped raise the profile of less well-known charities.
There are around 170 to 180,000 registered charities in the UK. That includes everything from the large international aid agencies like Save the Children and Oxfam that we might typically think of as charity, right down to small local community groups such as your local scout group or your church, and also the national organisations like the National Trust, Sue Ryder, hospices, cancer hospices. Most organisations that offer support services in this country tend to be charitable now.
And is it easier now for people to give to charity?
The rules have changed recently on tax-effective giving, and it's incredibly easy to give tax-effectively, whether it's a one-off donation or you're offering regular support to charity. And it's worth that much more to the charity because, of course, they have the benefit of getting the tax back.
But aside from the financial gains, what's perhaps more significant about regular giving to charity is the positive commitment it shows to others, especially at this time of year.
Marcia Hughes reporting. Well, with us now, Paul Banfield, independent financial advisor at Best Advice Financial Planning. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning.
There is currently this national giving campaign backed by the voluntary sector and the government to encourage us to give tax efficiently. What's it entail to make charitable donations tax effective?
Well, it's much easier than most of us feel. What we should do, instead of just putting the money in the tin, we can't criticise that, is complete a gift aid form so that the charity can claim back full tax relief on the contribution. It makes a massive difference to the charitable organisations.
And a difference of up to 40%?
It's amazing, yes, and in fact the figure that the charities are losing per year is 550 million in tax relief for us not giving in the right way. So it's something really that people need to be aware of, and it's good news now that this is becoming much more in the public eye.
You can do it through your employer, can't you? Just take it straight out of your salary or wage packet.
And in fact that's a great way of giving because it's deducted net from your salary. Higher rate taxpayers receive the extra tax relief, and a lot of people don't realise you can actually do that just as a one-off as well. So it's very important that people consider all the options when giving to charity.
But do all employers offer that? Are they bound by law to offer that, or is it only the bigger organisations?
Not all employers offer that, unfortunately, but what we could be is proactive in encouraging employers to offer. In fact, the ones that do offer this scheme often match the contributions, so if we give to the charity, the employer will at least match that as well.
What about share giving? How does that work?
Well, if we've got any shares that are gathering dust, maybe from the private issues that were given a while back, Don't let them stay in the cupboard, give them to charity. You get full tax relief on any gift, and in fact you're not charged any capital gains tax at all either.
And very quickly, land or property of some kind, is that easy to give away?
Exactly the same there, full tax relief given. If you have a property that you want to gift to charity, go ahead.
Paul Banfield, thank you very much indeed. Very useful advice, thanks.
Bank of England has raised interest rates by 0.25%. The base rate to 4% is to try to slow the housing market down and also dampen consumer borrowing, which has been described as rampant. It's the second rise in 3 months since last November.
Now, interest rates have gone up and could yet rise even further. So what does it all mean for the pound in your pocket?
The pound in your pocket.
And the money in your mortgage?
For older viewers, that was. With us now to answer your questions, Paul Banfield, who's independent financial advisor from Best Advice, and in the City Art business editor, Michael Wilson. Michael, thanks for coming back to us. I suggested to you yesterday the Doom merchants were talking about 0.5%. Quite rightly, you batted that away, but they are talking about perhaps this being the first of many to come now.
I don't know about many. I think the consensus is here that by May, not necessarily in May, but by May, another 0.25%. That seems to fit in what's going on at the moment. It all seems to follow a fairly consistent line. Everybody bet right for this one. I think they'll probably bet right for something by May. Just remember, of course, the budget, March the 17th, sort of just gets in the way of that, and any fiscal increases, tax increases, also tend to act as have the same effect as an interest rate rise. So the Bank of England, I guess, wouldn't do anything before then, and probably will wait a month to see how the budget sort of pans out and everything. So I think May looks actually quite good for that, and maybe about sort of 4.75 by the end of the year. That's what the pessimists are saying.
Paul here in the studio. Yeah. I mean, that's the base rate. Means a lot more by the time it's gone through the building societies.
Yeah, because of course they're putting their profit margin onto that rate, often as much as 1.25%, 1.5%. It can be, you know, a fair old whack. So it's very important people are planning ahead if they are on a variable rate to make sure that their budget can take any future increases.
Yeah, that's something to worry about, isn't it? Especially people who are trying to get onto the property ladder for the first time and they're doing their 2.5 times their salary or whatever.
Or 3 or 4 times.
Or whatever.
Yeah. It makes a big difference, of course. So 0.25%, 0.5%, particularly if it happens again for first-time buyers, they're already particularly stretched at the moment, and it can really put the housing market out of their budget.
Yeah, and I guess that's what they are trying to do, perhaps with the increases, to dampen things down. But lots of concerns. Let's turn first to Matthew Cole, who's written to us.
Yep, he says, I have 2 mortgages in London's Zone 1. Lucky old you. One is £250,000 on a property worth about £265,000, which I rent out at a rate that covers my mortgage. I hope you're taking notes here, Paul. The other is £300,000 on a property worth about £335,000, which I live in.
Both on a 4% fixed rate mortgage, but expires August 2005, so just over a year to run. Do you think that I should sit tight or sell up? This is the big buy-to-let market where people, you know, looking at the pensions, panicked and thought, right, let's go into property instead.
Well, certainly don't panic is the answer. To sell the house or the houses very quickly would not be the right thing to do. And I must say a 4% fixed rate is very attractive, a good rate. Many people today would be grabbing a 4% rate. So although it might seem expensive, certainly wait until August 05 before he makes any decisions at all. And then obviously plan for the fact that rates will be higher, and then look to sell his property, because of course if he does it now there'll be redemption penalties on the mortgage anyway, being that it's a fixed rate. So hold off, don't panic. The time will come in August 05 to relook at that situation.
You also have to watch those fixed mortgages though, don't you? Because you don't know what you're buying into afterwards.
Well, there's a good point, because is the redemption penalty finishing in August 05 or does it go on thereafter? That's something that he would need to check.
Well, you perhaps have to pay the full variable rate for 6 months or a year afterwards.
Afterwards, but there's no doubt at all the penalties would be higher right now while he's in that fixed period.
Yeah, okay. Someone calling themselves Worried of Glasgow asks, I have an £85,000 mortgage consisting of £60,000 endowment at £131 monthly and £25,000 repayment at £324 a month. Currently on a 2-year fixed rate at 3.79%. Is this still a good deal? Michael, what do you think?
Well, I can't really offer advice about this kind of things, but I just sort of added up the figures. I would have thought that looks rather high. I thought he's paying about $455 a month for that, for the 85,000 total. I would say that loyalty is no longer an issue as far as companies are concerned, even not now. And I'll tell you why I'm saying that, because when interest rates were going down, very few of them actually passed on those interest rate decreases to their customers. So I think Worried of Glasgow ought to perhaps get in touch with the company, and not so much the complication of its endowment or repayment, but just find out whether he is actually getting a good deal and what he could get elsewhere. It's a bit of hard work, but it might well, on figures like that, he might save himself £50 a month.
And Paul, he's got that dreadful word in there, endowment. I mean, a lot of people, you know, have seen the projections fall and fall and fall, and perhaps have taken out bits of repayment mortgage to top it up as well. I mean, people are really being sort of stretched